Hello, good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Campus Exclusive.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, and good evening to your cherished listeners.
Great. This is a very lengthy piece that you have put out there. It tackles something very important, an area that often we don't pay attention to, because the point, therefore, is that it's fee paying. You choose to do fee paying. So go ahead and bear all the costs. If you want to go to private universities, that's your problem. Go ahead and bear all the costs. But you make a case for why there should be some look at the point of capping the fees that is often paid at the university level. Try again and summarize for us what exactly your point really is on this particular issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Education as a public good has never been in doubt. So that if we appreciate and recognize that education contributes to the development of the country, then our approach to the development of education will be different from how we approach other development issues of the country. And you and I know clearly from a report that we read from the UNESCO that our graduate education is still below what is expected for the development of the country. Be that as it may, we're looking at how, as a developing country, use university education to be able to develop our country. That is, feeding in the required and the skillful human resource that can help the country to develop. And you know that paying of fees becomes one issue. I try to trace a little historical antecedent from the 90s when the issue of to pay or not to pay university came up. And that was, in my view, in the wake of the inception of private university education in Ghana. Okay, so that government saw the need to say that, look, if there are private universities where your colleagues will be going and paying fees, why don't you also pay fees? So that opened us up to both public-private education fee payment. And since then, it has been a free market determination by the university, both private and public. Public because, I mean, if you look at the fees that are paid in the University of Ghana, for instance, are not the same fees that are paid in the University of Cape Coast or KNUST. There are differences. Or you ask that what informs that differences in tuition payments in fees. And when you come to the private university, where it is a free open market thing, then the university determines how much it wants to pay. So that you see a huge disparity in some universities charging so much and others charging at a certain level. Going forward, and the determination of government to get more Ghanaians educated, I do not think that the intention is to just keep students education up to SHS level and leave them, because that then would defeat
if you would, sir, let me come in here very quickly, and then you continue with that point. So from the argument that you've made so far, then perhaps the best way forward would not be a cap, but perhaps a general idea of where exactly we should have, so that you can either go above it to a certain extent or be below it to a certain extent. Because if we appreciate the fact that there are certain differences in terms of the quality of education that the University of Ghana, for instance, is providing as against that which the University of Education Winneba is providing, we cannot expect, therefore, that we would have a certain cap that would generally apply to all universities. We can have an idea and say that it should be a plus or minus of this. Would you buy into something like that?
Okay, you see, where I mean, if you talk about the university education, talking about qualification of lecturers and the courses that are being studied.
Exactly.
If they are the same courses, or you award a degree of the same level, then one would expect that the fee payment will be the same. okay, in terms of tuition.
But if you also pay attention to what goes in the provision of that quality, if, for instance, University of Ghana has services or systems that University of Education Winneba does not have, for instance, access to the internet and a couple of other things, then one would expect that based on that, the quality is enriched, even though the degree is the same thing.
Yes, there may be some differences, as you rightly pointed out, but the tuition fees, which I mentioned specifically in that paper, it should be the same across board. If you talk about other services that augment the quality, then that can be another argument. But the tuition fee should be the same thing. Okay, so that if you talk about other services like hostel, accommodation, etc., you have an accommodation which takes 4 people in a room. We do not expect that an accommodation that takes 2 in a room will pay the same thing, you know. So that is the other argument. But the point here is that even if you look at the public universities where they are subvented by the government, okay, and they have to raise additional revenue in order to meet their growing expenditure, okay, in order to provide investigation, you see that even in that direction, the fee differences are there. Okay, where is this thing all coming from? You see, it all started with the Ivy League universities in America, which we have tried to, in a way, copy into our system here. And I did a comparison between America, if you like, and Great Britain, which we are more in tune to because of our education. In fact, that is why our public universities, were not paying fees in the past until these private issues came in. Okay, so now you have a dichotomy of the public-private, which are both paying. That's what I call the hybrid. Okay, so that if we do not put a certain measure to it, which I'm saying, then it becomes more for the student of the means of affordability rather than who qualifies best.
On that point, you make an argument here titled Financial Inequality, where you argue that in the absence of university fee capping, enrollment will whittle down to ability to pay as against other important factors. Where enrollment is solely about ability to pay, it will affect the holistic process in selecting qualified applicants for admission. While this argument seems quite tenable and, of course, of a very kind conception and all that, you perhaps miss also something that is very crucial, that in the provision of very quality education, we would expect that a lot of money would go into it. And so maybe we shouldn't just, as a country, because we want to train people, just go on this kind gesture of giving university education to everybody who just would aspire or dream to have it. And then in the wake of doing that, provide very less quality system rather than focusing on the quality and making sure that people pay what actually is needed to provide that sort of education.
Okay, good. That's a good point you raised there. Look at the issue again. What's the essence of government trying to give free SHS? Is that something just to give education to people at that level, or is this to give education to people to propel them to aspire to get to that university level, of which the quality can feed into the national development that we're talking about here? Okay, so that where you have people who are not able to pay because of the fee being at a certain level, then you'll be taking them out of the bracket. Okay, and taking in those who may, of course, have done well, qualify, but have the means more to pay compared to those who have done very well but have nothing to pay. Okay. See, look at it now. Going forward, 3-4 years, you have many more people qualifying to enter into university than we have today because of the free HSS thing. If it continues as we have been promised, okay. what provision are we doing at the next level? Are we saying that, okay, because it is free at secondary school, they should be able to pay everything that they are being charged at the university level? Would that produce the results that we want? I'm making a simple argument that if we recognize that education is one of the things that we need as a country in order to reach our development agenda, then something special must be made. Just as we've done the effort at the SHS level, a certain effort must also be made at the university level, so that we'll be able to accommodate that numbers that will be coming in.
On the point of the relevance of education, maybe the point that the critics would also bring is that you're completely missing the point. The argument shouldn't be about aspiring to go through the education system as far as you can and just everybody wanting to go to the university and all that. Maybe the focus and the emphasis should also be on the provision of quality education, even at the high school level, such that if one graduates from the high school, it shouldn't necessarily be a must that you can only contribute significantly to the country and the development only when you have gone to the university. And of course, tie this also in with where exactly your arguments stand with respect to Ghana's ability to be able to provide that which you talk about also.
Good point you made there. But there again, no matter how you look at it, we still need a certain percentage of industry graduates, highly trained, skillful, in order to feed in the development agenda. So it's not an argument of everybody going accessing the industry, but it's an issue of getting the percentage that is required and the ability for them to get into that space, that investing space. And also, if you look elsewhere, where people have finished, let's say, at a secondary level or high school level and not proceeded to university, certain provisions have been made. So what are level of that provision that is made in this country in order to absorb those people who finish into, if you like, vocational education and all that? And even the relevance or the recognition that we give to those professions. So it's not only about the university education. But saying that we necessarily need that number of people. We necessarily need that number of people, and we shouldn't purposefully put in certain policies that would deprive us from getting that number of people in that space.
I see. Let's quickly look at this other issue that you raised, the disparity in quantitative and qualitative enrollment, and you argue that a fee issue can breed the perception of highly charged universities as necessarily good and vice versa. If care is not taken, the government would be praised for the huge numbers of students who will get out of senior high schools but cannot get into the universities. And again, here, I think it's another issue that perhaps you might also be missing, because the way the market itself is structured, this perception does not entirely hold as true, because indeed, people know exactly what it is that they go in for. That's why they choose certain schools and all that. The mere perception or the fact that some schools are paying so much, if those schools don't churn out the quality, the market itself will detect that and people would not go in there. So if people go in there, it is safe to assume, therefore, that they are providing good and quality education. You would agree?
Yeah. Okay, go on, please.
No, I'm only asking that would you agree with that point that I am making, that indeed the market checks itself, and for that matter, if the schools take much, as you argue here, then it means that that perception that you hold cannot be true, because if they were not putting out quality, people would not go there and pay that much money.
Actually, you and I have been in this country where the National Accreditation Board have had reasons to close down some universities because they are of the view that they do not meet certain quality standards, for which reason they should operate as a university. Those schools had a lot of students, all right, before they were asked to close. So that to say that the market will check itself, yes, the market will check itself, but to what extent? When people are pressed for space, okay, definitely they will go in there. Then that quality thing that we're looking out for will be lost. Look at it in this way. If a university, of course, the universities are there, they have their overheads. I mean, if you have a lecturer who can teach maybe 100 students at the same salary, but because of low enrollment, he has maybe 10 or 5 students in a lecture room, the overheads are going to be the same. The salary is going to be the same. The electricity, the light provided for air conditioning in the lecture room will be the same. Okay, so that if because of affordability, the schools would have to open up the entry qualification so that they can get the numbers to make the money that is expected. They will do it.
I'm sure this is a debate that would go on for some time now. I'm very grateful that you raised these issues, and I must admit that very important. Of course, we need to pay some more attention in this particular area. Thank you so much, Mr. Nii Armah Addy.
Thank you. I appreciate it's a very difficult subject to discuss, but I think that we need a little more introspection into it, and then we'll be able to get clearly the picture that I'm trying to paint.
Very well. Thank you so much for raising this subject. We're grateful for your time this evening. So that's
Thank you very much.
The author, and of course, he's an educationist, Mr. Nii Armah Addy, and very interesting perspectives that he brings to this subject of capping, particularly with respect to the fees at the university level. Jamal.
Yeah, I think I very much agree with the gentleman with that resourceful piece and the interview he has granted and the information he has been able to, pack into this very short interview. But Karim, education is that value-adding proposition to human capital of every nation.
Yeah.
Whether it is in our education, university education, whether it is in our high school education, in the basic education, technical education, whether it's going to be learning a trade or anything, it would be a value-adding proposition to the human capital of every nation. But how accessible are we going to be able to make that value-adding proposition to the human capital or to the people of a country, regardless of their financial backgrounds? So this is the question, to me, the gentleman is actually trying to raise, that how accessible is education going to continue to be, regardless of your financial background? And what is policymakers or what is policy doing about the escalating fees of especially tertiary education? So this is a very good question and a very good article the gentleman has put out there. And I hope that policymakers would actually look at this particular piece and make meaning out of it, or make legislations out of it that would actually protect the parent and the student from paying exorbitant fees for the same lecture that they could have had at any other place or any other tertiary institution in Ghana.
You go ahead.
Now, the second thing is that, the article looks at it comes at a critical point where Ghana is getting ready to implement our free SHS program, which is going to have a very huge toll on our university education, because the effects is going to be enormous. There's going to be more people that are qualifying into our universities.
More access will mean, to a very large extent, more people
will be coming in. And that will also have an effect on our public purse, because government subsidy on tertiary education would also have to expand. Exactly. And where is government going to get money to be able to sponsor all these things? So there is the need for government to actually start to plan or think into the future. Otherwise, the repercussions of this free SHS policy will slap us in our face one day if we don't think and plan ahead of it. Because subsidy in education is not just at the basic level, but it passes through all the levels of our educational system. Yeah. And it needs to be checked and looked at. And this gentleman is actually telling government or policymakers that, look, there is the need for you to arrest the rates.
Yeah.
Okay, Ni Ama Adi, that is the name of the gentleman, that brilliant gentleman. He's actually trying to tell government that there is the need for you to pay attention to where this country has come from, where it is now, and where it is going in our educational setup. Because continuously, fees continue to escalate or to move upward. We don't see the downward trend in our educational fees. That is why now government is even trying to reduce the burden of parents by making the senior high education free. But that will still not solve the problem, because there's another problem that is coming ahead, and the number of people that are going to gain access to our universities. And the subsidies that government is going to put in there would also be enormous, maybe even huge than the free SHS fee that he had even offered to foot. So in all these, I am of the view that the gentleman has actually put on a very excellent issue that needs the attention of these our political debaters, especially the NDC and NPP. This is the time for them to show Ghanaians how true they actually love us, how true they actually want to develop the human capital of our nation, so that we can move to the future with everybody on board. So that is my very short submission on this one.
Very well, thank you so much, Jamal. And let's get to Kwame Peters on this subject. And of course, right after this, we also have to touch on the issue of Ibrahim Mahama and Yoko. We're speaking to Dr. Justice Abdullahi on this matter. But Kwame.
Yeah, Karim, I think that Mr. Adi has written a good piece. And in principle, I do agree with him. But I realize that you are trying to read between the lines for asking him on the question of capping, what he meant by capping. Of course, it also raised ideas and a lot of questions in my mind. If you want to say cap, well, capping means I'm putting a seal on it.
Exactly.
And I wonder whether we can put seals on school fees for even a year.
Yeah.
Because you might never know what is going to happen within a short period.
Yeah.
And this is an authored piece. It's not somebody reported. So it means that this is exactly what they wanted to write.
Yeah.
Probably
an opinion.
While he wanted to use standardized or something else he wanted to ask. But I thought that he would do a little bit of comparative studies just to carry the message across properly. Of course, everything he's saying, as I said, in principle is okay.
Yeah.
But then it would be fair to just see how much those in the UCC or Tech or University of Ghana pay for specific stuff. Of course, it will be fair to know, because...
But the argument he makes is that if you look at tuition without any other extra cost coming in, if we are providing the same, say for the same degree, one would expect that, particularly on tuition, that is entirely the case of teaching and other facilities that aids the teaching. There shouldn't be so much of a difference or a gap as we often would have the case.
Yeah. Of course, you're right, but as I'm saying, that if you try to do a little bit of comparative studies, you come up with a lot of some of these analysis you're talking about. For instance, some of these things might not just be as or how it is or how we are thinking about it. For you know, professors here take differently from other professors at other universities. We don't know. Or then, if it comes to the teaching fees, what's the difference? Of course, last week, is it Mama Yarega? Yes. He was trying to raise this issue in Parliament that from 1992, and there has never been any regulation on the school fees or fees paid at the universities. And he's trying to push this issue across. Of course, it's a German one. But I think that a lot of things should be considered. You know, the IGFs are also looked at, what the university even does. You know, if you go to UCC, okay, all apologies to, if you go to UCC, the thing that we do with technology, University of Ghana online, they still do manual. If you go to UCC, University of Ghana, your timetable can even come even when the semester begins. You see it there. But then in UCC, they get to know their timetable days before they write their exam. A lot of differences here and there. As I'm saying, that some of it would be good to do more of what is going on in the various universities. Of course, you can't say that a private university pay this, pay that, or ask the students to pay that. It's private. So far as they've had their certification to regulate, of course, they will determine how much they pay. But as I said, in principle, it's okay. If you look at the SHS, apparently most of the things that they do are evenly the same.
Yeah.
Even though one way or the other, the PTAs and those things make
they are extra.
1 or 2. So then, as I'm saying, that if you're able to make mention and put specifics there, of course, it will be able to carry the message across properly. But in principle, it's okay.
Very well. So that's the point there on education. Jamal, very quickly.
Yeah, I think capping is necessary, especially when Ghana starts to harvest these graduates from the free SHS. So let's not doubt that one. I'm saying that especially because when those free SHS people start to come, there will be an overflow. And public universities will no longer be in control.
Maybe the focus there, that's why I asked you, should not be necessarily going to the university after you leave the high school.
Definitely.
If that is an automatic next stop for everybody, that's why we would have a problem. If we have a high school system that churns out very good graduates who would not necessarily want to go to the university but can do something else, we wouldn't be talking about this.
Yeah, we wouldn't be talking about that. But now the stream is that every person must, or every person wants to go through the university, because after your secondary education, that is the next highest institution that everybody targets. Apart from our polytechnics, which have also been virtually or have been converted into technical universities. So we need to actually re-strategize where graduates of the SHS or the free SHS, when they come out and they are not able to get admissions into our universities or the technical universities, they would actually find a place to fit in while they wait for an admission into the university. But other than that, the whole, policy would be defeated in the end.
Very well, thank you, Jamal. Let's move on quickly and do this final story before we pick your calls. Yoko orders Ibrahim Mahama to pay 12.7 million Ghana